Hello and welcome to the show with myself, Cian Lynch, joined by Vincent O'Toole this week. Vincent, how are drinks with you?
All good, Shane, yourself?
Not too bad. Do you like the intro music there?
Yeah, very snazzy. It was playing a bit over there. I was wondering how long more was going to continue to feed into the show, you know?
Yeah, it just gets that energy going for me. Just a reminder to the viewers out there, we're brought to you by OurGameRetro.com. If you want to get this cool Mayo zip up top, if you want to get any of these options on screen, there's a full gamut of all sorts of jerseys you can get there. So go to OurGameRetro.com, use the promo code OurGame. Vincent, the weather over the weekend was absolutely scandalous. So no better place to start than in the Wexford Tipperary game, which was called off. Look at the state of this.
Yeah, pretty horrific looking now. Jeez, that's absolute battering Wexford Park's taken there, you know. And that was a pretty late postponement, I think, compared to the rest of them, you know. I think early on in the morning it looked like that was going to go ahead.
They travelled all the way down, didn't they?
Yeah. But yeah, look, it was right that across the country. I was at Killarney, Kerry, Donegal. Sorry, we're looking here. Yeah, this is the most amazing one of the weekend. The Jordan Morris point attempt at the very end of Mead Down.
Yeah, looking back out to the corner flag. And you know, like as I was watching games over the weekend, I was like, God Almighty, it's not the most exciting stuff I've ever seen in over the course of my years watching GAA. But how on earth are players supposed to play out in this sort of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, like I was, as I said, I was in Fitzgerald Stadium for Kerry Donegal. I suppose kind of the sneer was beforehand, you know, it's viewed as this most beautiful, picturesque place to play football. Obviously, you think of Munster Championship games and the majestic McGillicuddy Reeks and all that. But as we were walking up Lewis Road, it was absolutely pouring rain. We kind of came in around the back of the Lewis Road end, the terrace. You kind of walk around the main uncovered terrace end, getting towards the press box, and it was just looked absolutely horrific. There was a couple of the Kerry goalkeepers were out doing a bit of a drill. This was about 1 o'clock. And the Donegal bus was pulling in about 1 o'clock, so we were getting in. And I know they'd stayed down in Killarney the previous night, but I mean, like, it was so grim for them facing into it. And obviously then they were playing against the wind in the first half, made a good fist of it for about 10 minutes. But yeah, look, there's an obvious caveat to any kind of criticism and assessment you do of a lot of teams over the weekend, possibly with the exception of Dublin Mayo. Just watching on TV, like, it looked like kind of benign enough conditions, you know, and pretty more favourable than most places over the weekend where you're trying to play football. I thought it was interesting, right? It was subsequently called off, but I was following the kind of tweets yesterday morning as regards postponements and all that. And at that stage, Galway Offaly, they were saying was still going ahead, but they were advising supporters to stay away from Salt Hill Prom on the way to the game. Now, obviously, if anyone knows Pearse Stadium, that's pretty much right next to the stadium, you know. So, and given is it the windiest ground in Ireland in terms of kind of when a gale hits home? You see the Meath game a couple of weeks ago. I was wondering what sort of conditions that was going to be if it went ahead, but obviously that was called off. And it'll be just see like the knock-on effect for that now. You're looking at a lot of those games are probably going to be slotted in for the weekend of 5th, 6th of March. And I think that will probably make a lot of those football teams will have to play 5 weeks in a row. And the stakes are higher in football than I think in the hurling league. So I think with promotion relegation issues and all that, it will be interesting to see will that schedule catch out a couple of teams at different ends of the table, you know?
Yeah, it probably will. And like you're saying, like with the Tailteann Cup and, you know, that sort of stuff at stake for Division 3 and 4 teams going forward or whatever it pans out, that's going to be tough for them. London for Sam, says Thomas Gallagher. We're going to have Stephen Poacher on in a while. He wants to have a quick word about London winning 3 games for 3 after having a couple of years out of competitive action. Just to round up Division 1, Mayo beat Dublin 2-11 to 12 points. That's 3 defeats in a row in the league for Dublin. Obviously a fourth if you go back to the All-Ireland semi last year. Armagh drew with Monaghan, 1-7 to 10 points. Kerry beat Donegal handsomely enough, 113 to 0-7. And Tyrone beat Kildare 2-7 to 12 points. You know, there was plenty of comments last night. Pat Spillane said it on the Sunday game about Intercounty not being in the shop window for August and September. And, you know, I saw plenty of other comments about how, you know, the best of weather, you know, we often see it in those 2 months and we're going to have no games on. But, you know, like club has to happen at some stage, and most of us absolutely love the club and like the storylines and find it compelling. And I think it can only grow the more time of the calendar it's given, and the fact that because of the split season, clubs are going to get better because they have their better players for longer, and they don't have to sort of peak for one game in April and another game. It's all over the shop. And the other thing is, August and September are now open for club players. So tens of thousands of players are going to be playing in those months, rather than a handful of players that would have been playing between All-Ireland semi-finals and finals and maybe even quarterfinals too. Where do you lie on this argument? Would you adjust this, or are you on Pat's Bland side?
No, I would be on the Pat's Bland side of it. Maybe it might go back a week or two. Maybe we could have a situation where the Ireland football final is the second weekend, but I just don't think it's feasible anymore to be thinking of September All-Ireland finals, because we can't have a situation where club championship can be played during the season. I mean, we have round robin now in Munster Hurling Championship, so the demands are far greater on counties. So it's just not feasible to be trying to put the clubs into that. I think the split season is the only way to go. There is a comparison made a lot with kind of rugby, soccer in a promotional angle in terms of trying to fit it in. But it's not an accurate comparison, because we obviously have a situation, unless we're going to split county and club and that guys are going to play for their county and not going to play for their club, which I don't think anyone wants to see develop. But I mean, rugby don't have a situation where the Munster and Leinster players are expected to turn out for their clubs in the All-Ireland League, and they try to have to fit those fixtures into the calendar. And like, it is a participation sport. That is ultimately it at the end of the day. There is no problem with some people aren't into the club game. I kind of would agree that it may have a ceiling. I'm not sure it's going to capture the imagination, and the people will engage with it as much as others. As much as great, like we were both at the club finals recently, and the storylines were just the drama of it was just unbelievable. Ballygunner and Kilcoo. Yeah, that's not for everyone, and that's okay. But I think ultimately it just comes down to the amount of thousands of club players around the country that have certainty in their schedules now. Even little things that guys, when they finish college exams in May, there is a window there, I think, for them this year for the first time to go away for a holiday without being kind of, under pressure from club managers and club coaches to stay around and say, look, I'll be back by, say, the 1st of July, and you can then have a proper preparation for championship. I think a lot of clubs, counties provisionally are looking at kind of the last weekend of July, presuming their counties won't be in an All-Ireland final, that they'll be available for it, So I think we just have to kind of realize that this is the way forward, And in fairness, I actually saw a good point made recently as regards to the shortened county season. Colin Keys was making a conversation on Newstalk. He compared it to the NFL at the moment. The NFL season, obviously, it finished last weekend with the Super Bowl, but it's what, five months max, from September, January. And that's okay. It has its place in the shop window, and that's it. I mean, the GA is just a very unique structure whereby the top players are also playing at a lower tier level. So I think it has to go like that. Or else the other option is to just not only split the season, but split the player involvement. The players are solely county, but I don't think anyone kind of wants to see that that develop, And I mean, if we go back to the situation that people are saying the September All-Ireland finals for like the romance and the tradition element of it, like what about the damage that will do to, like, we'd be having this argument then about situations like we'd be saying it's farcical that we're playing club games in. Do you remember a couple of years ago the Tipperary football final was played on Stephen's Day? Was it, or was it the 27th of December?
26th or 27th of December, yeah.
Yeah, and like we'd basically be having this conversation at that time. We were then saying, it's farcical that club games are played in the depths of winter. So look, maybe it can go back a small bit from where it is now. Maybe the hurling final is a small bit early in mid-July.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing I would suggest is possibly maybe having them, is it the All-Ireland semi-finals are kind of, football semi-finals are followed a week later by the hurling final. I think there's an argument maybe for the All-Ireland finals, maybe to have a 2-week build-up, to kind of let it breathe and kind of the promotional angle there. But I certainly wouldn't be in favour of going back to a situation where pushing it out September.
Yeah, no, I agree with you at that point. The formula might have to be finessed a little bit, but you do have to, I mean, if you're a club player, you don't want to have to wait till after Christmas to play your club finals and that. And even though I actually find that the weather is better, like from our club runs, is better in November, December and early January generally than it is at this time of year. Like it seems now that February and March are particularly bad the last few years, my experience of it anyway. Maybe other people remember it differently. But it's just when we have a week or two like this where it all comes sharply into focus. But like at least if clubs can play their All-Ireland semi-finals and finals at Croke Park or some of the big stadiums when they're not really being used that much across the board, that's a way to facilitate those competitions while also giving club a bit of a window in decent weather too. Like there has to be a balance. It's never going to be perfect no matter what happens.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's a bit of give and take. I mean, like one thing this weekend did prove, it showed, we give out a lot about fixture makers, but I was thinking it showed the foresight of the Leinster Council to push for their Leinster Club football semi-finals and final, and the Leinster hurling final to be played in Croke Park. Like they had no issues with is O'Moore Park going to be available or is O'Connor Park going to be available that time in December, which I thought was quite good. But yeah, I'd have to double check it, but I mean, I think you're right in what you're saying about that February, March thing. It feels like that's the time each year that there is this weekend, that there's one weekend every year kind of marred in the GA League with postponements. I mean, it was early March when, say, the Beast from the East, the snowstorm in 2018, and that kind of put paid to a good section of the GA fixture schedule. Look, it's just natural. Like there's going to be at least one weekend, and you imagine with kind of changing weather systems and kind of things getting a bit more variable, this is just something people are going to have to make do with, and kind of adapt. Probably the one thing is just trying to make the calls a bit earlier so that teams, thankfully there was no kind of stories of wasted trips, I think, yesterday, that it wasn't too far for teams to travel. I think at least Offaly going to Galway, that wasn't too far. Trying to think else, Westmeath, Longford. I suppose Tip to Wexford obviously is a bit of a trek now, to be honest. I've had to have made and have to go back, and I think most counties are probably okay with the decision yesterday, but it's just that, like I said, it's the knock-on effect now. Managers having to tailor their preparation now and now realising they're not going to have that gap weekend in the 5th, 6th of March for the football.
Yeah, so a couple of comments coming in here. Stephen Poacher is just about to come on. Thomas Gallagher says, league is best competition, so it should be played during spring, summer, move provincials to winter. Green plan still makes them too important. And Grode Ogo Gracon says, proof that Ulster counties were foolish not to back Proposal B. Next year there could be 5 Ulster counties in Division 1 and no Leinster, yet Leinster champions will take the quarter-final space. So interesting points on there. Stephen Poacher joins us now. Stephen, how are things?
Not too bad, Shane, not too bad. Benton, how's things?
Hey, Stephen.
So, over the weekend, obviously some great results for different counties. Mayo beating Dublin, Armagh drew Monaghan, Kerry battered Donegal, and Tyrone came from behind and beat Kildare, Stephen. So, I just want to throw an image up on screen here. I haven't shown it to Fintan just yet. But obviously Dublin, they feel like they're in a little bit of a tailspin. This is 4 competitive defeats in a row if you go back to last year's All-Ireland semi-final. And I was doing some stats on them. And this is one that I came up with here that I found so interesting. And it's the goals drying up. In Desi Farrell's first 16 league and championship games between 2020 and 2021, they scored 24 goals. So that goes all the way up till the end of the Leinster Championship in 2021. In his 7 competitive games since then, they scored just 3 goals in total. So that's from 1.5 goals per game to 0.4 goals per game. And obviously their defensive record, as Fintan was pointing out to me beforehand, isn't particularly good either. What do you reckon is happening, Steve?
Yeah, funny, I was going to touch on that. I haven't heard what you were saying defensively, but there's another stat as well. Shane popped up that they've conceded 56 points in 3 games. The only other county that surpassed them was Carlow with 59. And like there's no other county anywhere near those sort of statistics. Like for example, Kerry in Division 1 after 3 games of 31 points conceded, no goals conceded. Derry in Division 2, 20 points conceded, no goals conceded. Galway, albeit they've only played 2 games, they've only conceded 15 points, no goals. And it would be a worry. It would be a worry, Shane, for me, that they look so exposed defensively. And let's be honest, on Saturday night, I watched the game Saturday night, and I just have a couple of names down here, like Comerford, Davy, Bourne, Fitz, Sean Bulger, Scully, Rock, Small, Fenton, Kilkenny, Brian Howard. These aren't seconds players. These are players that have won All Irelands. These are really established club players, senior county players. These are players that have been around a long time, who have tasted success. But I suppose maybe, Shane, it's like the old adage, once you lose once, then you're vulnerable. The aura's gone, the mystique is gone, and I just think teams are coming out Croke Park and realising that we can get at Dublin. And it's a bit it's like any sport. I suppose you even take, for example, a support Man United myself, and Ferguson goes, the aura goes, the fear factor goes. Teams would have been scared coming to Old Trafford. Now they're thinking there's 3 points for us. And it's in any sport. I remember chatting to Big Anthony Cunningham from Crossmaglen when Crossmaglen were in their plum. And he says, Stevie, teams used to come into Crossmaglen and we would watch them through the window coming into the changing rooms. We knew we were 5 points down. They're away to Crossmaglen in a league match. He says we wouldn't have had to come out of second gear for league games, and and that was when they were whatever 19 championships in a row in Armagh. But once you lose that tag, once you're beaten for the first time, Cross's aura is gone now. Everybody in Armagh feels they have a chance. Like Clanner and this year, Mahary before, Pierce Oaks. Teams now believe they have a chance, and it's the exact same. It's the exact same with Dublin. Teams are going now to Croke Park with the fear. I wouldn't say fear like factor, but they're not as fearful and they're not as worried about them. And Shane, I know the statistic about the goal scoring thing has come up, the lack of goal scoring, and maybe that is you're no Con O'Callaghan, no what do you call him? Jesus, name's got in my head now. Mannion, no Conley, all these marquee players that you would call them. Maybe some of the pace and athleticism from McCaffrey and McCarthy is gone as well, because they were a big part of a lot of their goals as well, particularly James McCarthy breaking through the middle and creating those many overloads. So maybe that's obviously got an impact to it. But I feel the biggest issue is their structure. There's no structure. They've no structure at all.
How does that manifest in itself? The very first play of the game. So remember, obviously, the 2020 All-Ireland a couple of years ago. First play of the game, James McCarthy bursts through and ultimately ends up in a goal with Dean Rock after 12 seconds. Very first move of the game here, Diarmuid O'Connor ends up knocking a point over from the edge of the 14, uncontested. And what I saw from the throw-in is whoever was his Dublin marker shot straight up the field. I suppose hoping Dublin would win the ball. It'd be passed to him and maybe he'd make a burst like Owen Merchant did a couple of years ago against Kerry. So to me, I was like, that is very un-Dublin. Like maybe it's a pre-rehearsed move, but it's unbelievably risky. So how is it manifesting itself, Stephen?
Well, just Diarmuid O'Connor, you mentioned it. I thought he was immense the other night. I thought he was immense on Saturday night as an individual. I thought he put in a brilliant performance, and probably have to be respectful to the teams that they've played too. They're playing Armagh, who at the present moment in time, statistically are probably playing, some of the best football in the country, along with Kerry, and they've played Mayo, of course, which on any given day Mayo can beat anyone. But I'm not sure, Shane. Like someone mentioned to me the other day, I was actually chatting to Benny Coulter early this morning, and just chatting to Benny on the phone, and he says to me, he says, like, it's probably remiss as well. It's probably been lost that Dessie Farrell has actually won an All-Ireland. He's actually won an All-Ireland with this group, and like he could actually go down as being a field manager in Dublin despite having won an All-Ireland, and in his first year in particular as well when he came in. But I think, Shane, this started with and regardless of what people might think, I think this started with Cluxton. I think that Cluxton, obviously not responding to his calls and not knowing what was going on, and then maybe there was a bit of doubt crept into the squad about the management team. It can happen very, very easily, and it happens in professional sport as well, where players start to doubt what the managers are doing, and I'm not questioning what Desi's doing, because the reports that I hear is that he's a fantastic manager and a really, really good coach. So hats off to him. Whatever he's doing, he's obviously getting it tight. But the management team might have lost the trust of the players a little bit. We don't know. We don't know, because no one really seems to be coming out and saying and the sound bites we're getting, Shane, are that it's the league, we're experimenting and things like that. But when you look at those list of names there, are they really experimenting that much? Because they're probably using the guts of 75-80% of players who have won All-Irelands.
Vinton, when you look at it, right, so every team is missing a few players at the moment, so I don't know if we can necessarily give them that out. But afterwards, Desi said that he's experimenting, he'd like the results, but he said, and this is a quote, "We're happy with their trajectory we're on." I mean, are you buying that?
Well, I think there was probably better signs on Saturday night, maybe from the other two games. You can argue maybe it was at a low bar, given the display against Armagh and Kerry. I mean, Armagh was at 6 in the end, but I think it felt like kind of a 10-point game beating. I think Kerry was pretty convincing. I think Saturday was a little bit different, and there was a bit more positive signs to hang your hat on. But even the fact that they're doing that, I guess, is a kind of a sign about how the kind of conversation around them has kind of changed, I mean, I suppose 2 points on the kind of personnel issue is that, one, in terms of the experimentation, you look at the team that they were playing on Saturday night. I think the stat was that Dublin used 9 players from Masters Ireland semi-final and Mayo used 7. So you look at some of those new guys, not familiar to a lot of people in the Mayo setup, like Dunican McHugh, Jack Carney, Paul Towie. They've come in and they seem to kind of slot it in perfectly. And obviously the main leaders, like Stephen mentioned, Diarmuid O'Connor, who was immense. I think Ryan O'Donoghue, who's becoming kind of a big kind of a focal point for them. Obviously, they got Oisin Mullen back. So I suppose Mayo's more recognisable names kind of really seem to kind of step up and kind of lead the way, maybe in a fashion that Dublin's just didn't quite have that kind of same level of performance. But the other thing I think is that when I think of their league games and how consistent they were, like I suppose you're thinking of the big names that are gone. You're talking about Connie and Clucks and all that, but to me, it's these last couple of weeks are showing the value of people like Paddy Andrews, Kevin McMenamin, guys that wouldn't have been as celebrated, but ultimately they were having huge roles to play in these league games, And I just wonder, again, we're speculating, like Stephen said, I suppose we don't have an idea of what's going on inside the setup, but the loss of that kind of experience, like even like, for example, when Desi won the All-Ireland in 2020, because this is Paddy Andrews recently, he was talking about basically himself, Keane O'Sullivan, Michael Darmacaulay and Rory O'Carroll weren't on the 26th that night. And the four of them afterwards, he says, went over to Croke Park Hotel together and they had a pint and they kind of knew the game was up. But I was just thinking, like, the four of them were still in with training. They were still providing their experience around the place. They were still kind of driving it. That's big kind of a leadership deficit and a kind of a know-how deficit to kind of lose. And then on top of that, you have kind of 4 or 5 experienced guys at the moment, like McCarthy, Callaghan, even Merchant, that are out kind of injured. That's just kind of an up to it. And then look, teams are scenting blood. There's no doubt about it. Like we saw it with Kilkenny and hurling when they kind of dominated for so long. It happens in every sport. We talked about my example there, but Dublin are a massive scalp now. Everyone wants it. 3 teams have got it so far. It's not unusual for Kerry to beat them, but for Armagh Mayo to beat them in the league is a big, big statement win for them. And you imagine, Kildare next Sunday, I know they're kind of battling for points as well, but they're welcome to Newbridge. I think the game after that is away to Tyrone. The challenges aren't going to get any easier over the next few weeks. But like, from the outside, it is kind of fascinating, I think, to be honest, what is going on. The fact that it's been 3 games in a row now, and I suppose the scale of the challenge. And I think it's the first time since 2009 they're probably in a proper relegation dogfight. I was reading over the weekend, which is amazing in itself with 13 years on,
Do you find it fascinating to watch what's going on with Dublin, Stephen? Because I have to say, it feels like can't miss TV, or I can't miss these games because you're just wondering what's going to happen next with them. And it's so strange to see them like this.
Yeah, no, Finton's completely right as well. And what he said about the panel, and even the likes of Owen Merchant, people forget about Owen Merchant and the impact Owen Merchant had in games and how great he was at breaking lines and transitioning, along with, even Johnny Cooper, experience in there as well, Philly McMahon, even being around the setup, you natural leadership there. And maybe some of these younger lads that have come in just don't have that same level of leadership and quality. But it is amazing, Cian. It is. And I know, like, we're still talking about it 3 weeks later, and, they've now lost, I think Finton said 3 this year, but including Mayo, that's 4 in a row now, competitive games. Which this group has never experienced before. So, like, it's a bit like winning. Losing becomes a habit. And I think next Sunday is extremely interesting. And I'll tell you why I think it's interesting. At the minute, mentally, Leinster are just broken, right? Everyone in Leinster is crushed by Dublin's dominance. Counties don't believe, there's no hope for counties anymore, and look, I think a lot of counties, and I've said this publicly and personally in the past, like, I do think a lot of counties do need to sit up and take a serious look at themselves, because of the way they've let this happen. Like, but when you actually look at last year, I think Finton was the championship against Wexford, where Wexford were 3-2 up at the first water break. And you were looking at it going, that's not normal. That's not normal. And they only beat Wexford, I think, 15-8 or 15-9 or something. And it was just like, this is definitely not Dublin. This is definitely not Dublin. And I think the signs were there that it was just starting to sort of creak a little bit. But I feel that next Sunday, if they could be beaten next Sunday by Kildare, I think it gives the Leinster Championship a really, really interesting feel this year. I'm not saying that Offaly will go and beat Dublin in the first round. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is it will give teams a little bit of hope and light to say, Jesus, you know what? If we get them on a one-off day, maybe away from Croker or whatever it happens to be, we could take them.
Finton, do you look at this Kildare team that managed to be, in a good position against Tyrone and ultimately lost 2-7 to 12 points, and there was that important goal from Darren McCurry later on. But Tyrone were down 4 players who were all suspended from that previous game against Armagh. Derek Irwin had a 1-on-1 and he blasted that and it was saved. Daniel Flynn had a goal chance that was blasted over the bar. Mark Donald obviously hit the free wide at the end, and it never looked like it even had a chance. Would you trust that Kildare team to be able to do what needs to be done against Dublin next week in Newbridge?
I think I've seen more encouraging signs from Kildare. I know they don't really have the points on the board to reflect that, but I mean, the 2 goal chances were the big ones at the end yesterday. But I did think this. I understand the point you're making about the Tyrone suspended players, but it's still the All-Ireland champions in their own backyard, and you're a team coming up out of Division 2 and you have a new manager. I thought it was still an impressive performance from them. I was at the game a couple of weeks ago against Kerry. I thought the way they as poor and all as Kerry's second half display was, I thought the way they wrestled back control of that game and they got something out of it when not everything was going well for them in the last quarter. You know, it looked like it was going to be kind of that hard luck story. I thought the way they kind of drew that game was impressive. Likes of Kevin Flynn, Mick O'Grady, Kevin Feely, I think real kind of pillars of the side. But I think, look, obviously Daniel Flynn's form has been sensational, but he's been kind of advertised. I think it's the improvements. You know, I like the look of Paddy Woodgate. I like the look of the way Jimmy Hyland is kind of putting a bit of leadership for it. Obviously Kerwin coming back into it. I suppose it'll depend over the next couple of weeks whether you're going to look back on that as a real missed opportunity. I mean, there's no doubt that both of the goal chances should have been stuck. Like the one thing about Flynn, he does kind of do that. If you look at him, the way he kind of hits the ball into the net, a lot of his shots are very rarely low into the net. A lot of them seem to kind of go high into the roof of the net. I don't know if that's a kind of a technique issue in terms of the way he was kind of going through in that, but definitely, I mean, I'd be kind of looking at more of those chances as opposed to all the pressure being on Donlan to kind of land that point at the end from the left wing. You know, it was a pretty difficult one to kind of save, but Glenn Ryan's attitude after the Kerry game was like, you know, it's what it was tried to point it out to him, you know, this was a praiseworthy performance and all that, and he was like, well, look, we didn't win the game. So I imagine that'll be his attitude after the Tyrone match. And look, they have to realize it's a huge opportunity. I mean, separating the Dublin thing for a moment, like just in terms of purely the relegation battle and in terms of staying up, like they're playing against one of their biggest rivals at the moment to avoid going down, and they're at home to them next Sunday. It's got to be a huge occasion, and it's going to be a pretty testing environment for Dublin. You imagine going down there, because there's definitely going to be a sense of anticipation and expectation amongst the home support that, you know, this Dublin team is vulnerable, you know, and that, like, go back to what we said at the start, that fear factor is maybe gone a little bit now, you know.
Yeah, so the other teams in Leinster just aren't good enough to take advantage of this dip in Dublin. Kildare, the exception, they have the footballers, but are just lacking self-belief or something. By the way, mentioning all the goals that were missed over the weekend, I just counted up a few of the lads who hit the crossbar or the woodwork. Darren McCurry did, Derek Canavan, Benny Heron, Jack Carney obviously came back off Evan Comerford and went into the net. David Clifford, Rian O'Neill, Michael Bannigan. What's going on with the goal scoring attempts, Stevie? Is it just very hard at this time of the year for lads to convert?
Yeah, well, listen, I thought Fenton had touched the nail on the head there. Like, a lot of people going high when they maybe should go low, you know. But the Kildare game, like, in particular, I think in the first half, you know, Tyrone had a lot of chances. You know, particularly in front of goal, Shane, that they could have put the game out of sight in the first half, really, you know, because I think at that stage, you know, if you concede a couple of early goals in those conditions, it's extremely difficult to come back into the game. But yeah, it possibly is a question of, you know, I think with the young underage players are coached is to aim for the black spot, and if it doesn't go in, you'll still get a point. You know, I think is the old real school mantra when people were going for goals. But, you know, low and hard is hard for a keeper to get down to, you know, and especially, and I think a couple of times Tyrone probably overplayed it a little bit as well. I think they were looking for the palm finish and walk one into the net, and, you know, I just think maybe even in the second half there was one or two overplayed as well. So look, it's probably just one of those things, a rare weekend, Shane, of missed chances that is probably just hard to explain, you know. But on the Kildare thing, what Fenton says is completely true. Like, I was hugely impressed with Mick O'Grady, and I have been impressed with him. Like, I think he's one of the best defenders in the country. Probably doesn't get the recognition, you know, that he deserves, you know. But you go through the team, and like they're a bit more steely now. They are a bit more steely, but they're not getting results, and that can be a drain as well. That when you're still putting in performances and not getting results, it can be difficult, you know, to keep going again. But you know, you look up front and the likes of Ben McCormick, or, you know, Jimmy Hyland, we spoke about him before, Shane, a few weeks ago. Like, time for him to really step up and shine. And of course Flynn is your marquee man, and when you've got forwards like Flynn, you know, you can get something out of nothing. But I was pleased with them, Shane, from an organisational point of view. I thought they looked a wee bit better organised defensively, a bit more steel about them, and I think Fenton hit the nail on the head as well. Despite the fact that Tyrone are missing those players, you know, it's Oma, and Oma is not an easy place to go to, and you can bet your bottom dollar that all week you see those suspensions. Tyrone were circling the wagons all week, but, you know, the whole country hates us. The GA hate us, you know, anti-Tyrone, anti-Ulster, and like, look, it's a great thing to have, and it's a great thing to pull on and hold, because it can really galvanise a group. Like, and who knows, like, you know, I think a week or two ago people were writing them off after the Armagh game, but then at the weekend people were admiring their resilience and their quality that they have in their squad, you know.
At this stage of the league, Stephen, of Tyrone, Kerry and Mayo, who all won at the weekend, is like, who's kind of really stepping up at the moment and impressing you?
I think Armagh, and listen, I actually think, you know, like Mayo have got results, and like it's interesting. Fintan talked about 7 of their team. I didn't realise that statistic that only 7 of their All Ireland semi-final team started. Like they have introduced a lot of new players, and they mystify me every week because they get results. They get results, and without playing particularly brilliant football. Like I felt last week against Monaghan. The Monaghan performance on Saturday night didn't shock me against Armagh, because for me Monaghan are maximising everything they have. Like Monaghan are maximising their resources, Shane, hugely. Like they've got, they've obviously got players like the likes of Darren Hughes, Conor McManus, who are at the latter stages of their career, but they're still putting performance. I thought Darren Hughes was immense on Saturday night. Some of the turnovers, driving through, winning kickouts, pressing the Armagh kickout, really aggressive, really, really well organised. The move of McAnespie to wing back, McCarthy to wing back, it seems to have sort of re-energized them and give them a new look. And, they've introduced the likes of Big Mohan there at full forward. I think he's only playing football this last couple of years at county level, and obviously Bannigan at centre half forward, a driving force. Well, like they've some very, very good footballers, Monaghan. Some really good footballers, and for the size of the county and how small the county is, they are maximising everything they have. And I wouldn't write any of these teams off. But we spoke about it before in the show. Like the way the league is this year and how it's going to run so quickly into the championship, I think your league form's more important this year than any year. I think it's hugely important that you come in with a bit of momentum into the championship, because you're only talking about, lads, about a 2 or 3 week downtime before you're out again. Like I know the league finishes the first week in April and Down's out 3 weeks later against Monaghan. So if you're coming in stuttering and stumbling in 2 or 3 weeks, that's not going to change. And it's going to be very, very hard to lift it. So I think the league, Shane, will have a huge impact in the performance of the championship later in the year.
So you wanted to talk about London, Stephen, because you have a bit of an insight in them. Michael Maher's doing a great job. 3 wins from 3 in Division 4 after a couple of years of not even getting to play competitive action. Some going. Yeah,
listen, it's fantastic. Joe Coulter, Benny's brother from Mayo Bridge. Joe's over there as a coach. Joe was there under Kieran Dealey as well, and obviously got to know Kieran very well during my time at Carlow. And they got a couple of past pupils played for London as well. Conor Doran, past pupil of mine from St Columban's in Kilkeel, would have kicked 7 points against Galway in the championship a few seasons ago. And Dorney would tell you, like people have no idea, Shane, about London's training sessions. Like London, like to go to a training session in London, like we could go to a training session here, jump in the car, and we're 5 minutes down the road. For them to go to a training session, they might have to jump on 2 or 3 different tube stops. It might be 90 minutes on a tube. You imagine that on a warm Tuesday evening, or a warm Thursday evening going to training. And then Dorney says on the way back, you can through Covent Gardens and you're seeing everybody out drinking in the streets and the crack's great. And he says it's very, very difficult to turn away from that as well. So you've got all the social aspects of London too. But logistically, Shane, it's so difficult for the lads, so difficult for them. And the guys would tell you as well, like it's obviously, even travelling across to Ireland is a huge thing. But they did something this year that was very interesting in January. They had a training weekend in Ireland, and they played down on the Saturday night, and Drew were down actually in Newry. And then they played a mixture of Armagh under 21s and subs. And those 2 games that they would have got at the start of January obviously would have stood them in great stead heading into the National League. And plus as well, be under no illusions, it happened to me as well in the first year at Carlow. You underestimate them, and you underestimate them at your peril. Like we went over to London, had a very, very difficult win, 14-12 in the championship. Went the following year and beat them by 7 or 8 points in the National League. But first year I was there, they beat Carlow, in Carlow. And like they have some very good footballers, some really, really good footballers. But the problem is, Shane, and it's a bit like any team, and we talked about Down last week, 84 players Down have used in the last 5 years. 84 players in the last 5 years, and people wonder why you struggle. You need a core group of players committed to the cause that are going to be there for 5, 6, 7 years. From a conditioning point of view, you develop, from a tactical point of view, you develop mentally as well, because it's a huge step up. And that's something that London have a problem with. It next year, that London team might have 10 new faces. Who knows? But listen, hats off them. I think it's a fantastic story and a remarkable achievement for them.
Fintan, can I ask you about Donegal? So 113 to 7 points loss to Kerry. Huge win in the first half. To me, Donegal were just trying to eat the clock in the first half, get into half time, not being too far behind. But to me, this was a very poor performance and not a great sign for the year ahead.
No, it wasn't good. In fairness, I did think in the first half, the first 15 minutes, they actually were quite impressive with what they were trying to do against the wind. Obviously not pretty to watch, but it was such a tough conditions to play in, but they were very good at retaining possession. Owen Boyne Gallagher was really, really good in terms of his attacking runs forward. He was involved in both the points they fisted over. And 13 minutes in, it was 2 points apiece. And given the conditions and everything, they would have been really, really happy with that. But they did, between then, that 12th minute and the 56th minute, they only scored 1 point, which is obviously the root cause of their problem. 7 down at half time wasn't insurmountable, you would have thought, in the second half, but obviously that freakish goal they conceded, the Sean Patton mistake. it was never going to be enough for them basically to come back from there. Couple of things, I suppose. Quayle McGonigal, I mean, Declan Bonner was talking about him after in terms of just your usual injury stuff. And, usually you talk about a guy saying he's out, but his body language, he was saying, yeah, he's out for championship. And he was just saying he's been our most consistent performer in his eyes over the last couple of seasons. And it looked like that's a loss that was really kind of hit him hard, in terms of kind of a guy that you're going to be have to plan without now. Obviously, there's a couple of big names to come back, Murphy and Langan, but a lot of their bigger names just didn't really kind of get going on the day. I thought it was kind of summed up with Kerry made a mistake towards the end and Donegal had a clear chance of goal. And if there's one guy coming in you think would execute the hand pass across property and find a man, it would be Ryan McHugh, but he just overhit it, and McBrearty didn't get on it. I mean, in the first half, McBrearty was at times the closest player to Patton when they were holding on to the ball. He'd come that far out. He was kind of starved of possession. So conditions were obviously a big factor, but Kerry adapted far better. And I mean, as Bonner was saying, given the scale of the trip that they had to embark on home, you're kind of hoping for something to kind of, I suppose, give you a bit of solace and a bit of reward for kind of the efforts with all the trip, but there wasn't kind of a huge amount to show for that you could kind of be looking towards. And obviously they had very little time to kind of, I suppose, park it. I suppose at least they had 3 points on the board heading into it. It wasn't like that defeat leaves them in a really, really disadvantaged position. It was only their first defeat of the campaign. But obviously the scale of the challenges now, they're playing Tyrone next Saturday night, he was kind of hoping for a little bit better. But I just thought Kerry looked far more hungrier for it, far more sharper. And we could probably touch it, but Sean O'Shea was just absolute joy to watch. He is on form. He's just a brilliant point kicker. He also was the Poacher list earlier. He also hit the woodwork in the second half when he was going through. He had a goal chance. He had another couple of ones that you thought he maybe could have gone for goals, but he fisted them over. But in what was a really, really difficult day and a turbulent day for football, he looked like a guy that the conditions really weren't impacting with his range and his accuracy at all.
Stephen, what are you seeing from Donegal here? I know they're down Michael Murphy, Jamie Brennan has to come back into the forward line. I think Paddy McBrearty, I've seen him look a little bit more trimmer. Maybe he's had injuries or something like that. But Donegal, are we go a bit too easy on them considering the talent they have? Should they be pushing a little bit harder than this? And then also Kerry, have you seen anything new from them this year that makes you think All-Ireland champions?
No, well, I agree with what Fintan said about Sean O'Shea. He's phenomenal, Shane. We were in Killarney about 5 years ago, and we were in a restaurant and we're chatting to, I think Clifford was playing for the under-17s at the time, and everything was about Clifford. And I remember this man at the bar saying to me, he says, I'll tell you, he says, we have a better one. He says, Sean O'Shea is going to be better. He says, so look, that's an argument for a different day, but he's a phenomenal footballer, an absolute phenomenal footballer. I thought he was superb, and he looks to put on a bit of really, really good muscle as well. You can see that in his physical development as well, which is obviously huge for him to go to the next level. But Donegal, going back to Donegal, I think Shane, Donegal, I said this a couple of weeks ago on the show, thought there's huge pressure on Stephen Rochford and Declan Bonner. I think there's huge pressure on them. This is a couple of years now that they haven't delivered in Ulster. Their league form this year has been very poor, albeit they're missing, obviously one of the best footballers in the country, and Michael Murphy. I think he changes the dynamic of their team. He's obviously a huge leader for them. They can mix their play up a little bit more when he's playing. They can go a little bit more direct, but I still feel they can still go direct. And I think Fintan hit the nail on the head. The first half, I was hugely impressed with the way they retained possession into a strong breeze. But the flip side of it is, and it's a bit like the Dara Kerwin moment in Kildare and Noma. Dara Kerwin went through in the 67th minute when the game's level and went for a goal. If he had fisted the ball over the bar, Kildare probably would have got something out of the game, and it's a bit like the Donegal one. They had 2 massive goal chances, Shane, during these long bouts of possession, but chose to flick them over the bar. But that early in the game against Kerry, against the Breeze, you've got to be taking the chance. You've got to be looking the onion bag, and a big goal against the Breeze, against the run of play, whatever it happens to be, it's huge. It's huge for your confidence. It's huge everything. It makes Kerry chase a little bit more. And then obviously, after about 15-20 minutes, Kerry got a bit of a foothold in the game. And those 6 or 7 minutes before half time, where they rattled on 3 or 4 scores, that was huge. And that was a big part of the game, because now then you're chasing a 7-point lead. The goal was an absolute killer. There's a turning point. It's not like Sean Patton, because I think he's a brilliant goalkeeper. But I do feel with the players that Donegal have, the personnel they have, the strength, the size they have. But people forget as well, Donegal club football's played like this, lads. It's played like this every single week. It's played through the hands. There's very little kicking in it. Maybe it's because the pitches in Donegal are so close to the sea. It's always windy, is the old adage that they talk about in Donegal. But it is a style of football that's ingrained in them through the hands. But that's grand through the hands. But their transition on Sunday now, particularly in the second half, was very laboured, very stagnant, very crab-like. It was very lateral football rather than direct. And moving forward, if they're going to progress, the game is evolving a little bit, and just being a bit more positive in their approach and really going at teams, because they do have the athleticism and they do have the players. But it's a big season for Declan and Rochford. A big season.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you have much time. I know you have to get back to school there, Stephen. But just a final thought on Kerry. Is there anything different from last year that you've seen in them this year? I mean, even at midfield, like Stephen O'Connor was supposed to be the guy to come in this year. Jack Barry and Diarmuid O'Connor played the other day. David Moran will probably come back. He's in his 30s now. Have you seen anything extra to say Kerry can go that next step this year, have more steel?
Well, look, Kerry are Kerry, and they're always going to be performing year in, year out, regardless of managements or who's brought in. I know Paddy, it was very high profile when Paddy Talley joined the management team, and Paddy will obviously add a wee bit of defensive steel and obviously a wee bit of robustness from that side of things. And it's probably evident, Shane, in their statistics as well, and that they've only conceded 31 points in their 3 games, and they haven't conceded a goal as of yet. And that would have been a huge question mark, Shane, over Kerry in the last couple of years. They're obviously a massive part of their game plan is pressing the opposition's kick out with those 3 banks of 4 or the 4-3-4, whatever formation they like to include. But listen, look, Kerry are Kerry. You're always going to get what you get with Kerry. They're going to kick the ball really, really well. They've got really, really talented players up front. And I suppose if you've got really, really good forwards, you want to get the ball as quick as possibly to them. So look, it's early yet. They've beaten obviously Donegal at home. They've beaten Dublin at home. I can't even remember. I don't even think I was really listening, but I heard Milan spouting something last night about we'll know how good Mayo are when they come to Killarney or something like that. But at this time of the year, it's probably very, very difficult to judge. And let's be honest, with the mess that Cork are in, and they're in a mess, an absolute utter mess. With the mess that they're in, Kerry are going to march through to a provincial final again. It's not going to be contested, but this is the point that I have made to you, Shane, before. Coming out of Munster, undercooked, playing an Ulster team, for example, who are coming out of Ulster, with 3 or 4 really, really attritional games under their belt. I just don't think it stands them in great stead, and I think that come the big day in Croke Park, I just feel they could be caught short again.
Yeah, okay. Well, I presume you have to get back to work there, Stephen. Should we let you go?
Yes, I probably have to, yeah.
Okay, well, look, really appreciate you joining us, and hopefully we'll be chatting again soon.
Pleasure as always, lads.
So that was Stephen Poacher there, former Carlow and Roscommon coach. It's great to have him on as ever. He's touched on that mess that your county Cork are in at the moment. Obviously, I'm sure Keith Ricken will be going away feeling pretty sore after that heavy defeat to Derry, 113 to 7 points. If I was to ask you what alarmed you most about that performance from the Rebels, what would your answer be?
I suppose the lack of scoring is probably one, and the kind of the attacking play. I thought there was a serious lack of width in there when they were trying to go forward. Look, I mean, I was watching it on the TGCar app, the screening out like a lot of people, so you're trying to get an appreciation of the conditions. Probably didn't do too badly in the first half, trailing 5 points to 3, but not much scores from play overall. I think it was only 3 points, and one of those was at the very, very end from Kevin O'Donovan. Like 7 points is pretty poor going. Similarly, had scored 10 points a couple of weeks ago against Roscommon. So away from home is quite difficult, for them. So I suppose in kind of signs like that, like in terms of the main plan seemed to be just kind of show Maguire to try and break the line, but there wasn't, much else kind of variety to it. Like in fairness, Sherlock is only just kind of back into it, and he did miss a big goal chance. Didn't look too bad on other occasions, but that was kind of a big change when Derry scored it. But look, being honest, Shane, to be honest, the result didn't surprise me. I mean, we can talk about kind of the wider term issues that, like Stephen talks about, Cork football being in a mess, and like you're kind of going back over old ground, you can kind of maybe bore people with that stuff. But just in terms of the short term for this, like looking at it, right? There's 3 guys yesterday made their league debut for Cork. They'd never played senior football before for them. 3 other guys have only made their debut for Cork in the last couple of weeks. 2 more guys who came on, same story. There's 8 debutants. 14 of the Derry team that played yesterday played against Donegal in the Ulster Championship last year, and 12 of them started. And I thought the gap in terms of cohesion, in terms of guys who were experienced and knew about intercounty football, the conditioning, the solid base that you have with Chrissy McCaig and Brendan Rodgers as your full back line. And this is a Derry team as well, if you think about it. Didn't have Garrett McKinless, and Kieran McFall didn't start. Two very, very prominent guys over the last couple of years. So I didn't really think from the outset, to be honest, that this was going to be a fixture that Cork would win. I think you'd have to be putting Galway's favourites to beat them next Saturday night. And from the outside, I would have thought just trying to claw onto your Division 2 status would have been the goal. And it's really interesting when you look at Division 2 now, it's two mini leagues have developed. I would have thought Cork down and Offaly would have been people that would have been struggling against relegation. I didn't think Meath would be probably as bad as they have been, but the four of them are really in a fair bit of struggles now at the moment. And maybe just one, I suppose, slight caveat to look at yesterday in terms of the fixture schedule. Derry's 3 wins so far have all come against teams in the lower half of the table. So they have to play their 3 promotion rivals yet. So maybe we'll find out a bit more about them then. The way the fixture list fell for Cork, the 4 sides that are playing in the first 4 games are the 4 sides in the promotion shake-up. So Cork's last 3 games are Meath, Down and Offaly. Maybe that'll be a bit more of a kind of an accurate barometer of where they are. They got the St. Finbarr's guys only just back into their team. It was interesting. I don't think the Kilcoo, I suppose it's only a week in fairness, the Kilcoo guys didn't come back into the Down setup. Maybe that will kind of strengthen their hand. But yesterday would have been the first time that the St. Finbarr's guys were back into it. Obviously, Maguire is kind of pivotal to them. Like not too many teams in the country, I think, are as dependent on one player as input. But there's probably a bit of interest now in Billy Hennessy, who would have been a Cork hurler last year, how he'll go at centre-back, how Sherlock at corner forward. But it's going to be a painful, I think, process. It's going to take time. They're obviously bedding in a new team. It's been a big, complete overhaul. I mean, I don't think there has been, I think, as many squad changes in Cork football probably since 2013, when a load of the guys kind of retired from the All-Ireland winning team. You know, there's been a major change since last year. And I think it shows with the amount of under 23s and how you need a couple of years to kind of get up to that conditioning level. Derry just looked like they knew what they were about in terms of what was required and kind of interplay and all that kind of stuff. And they were able to kind of swallow Cork up quite easily, you know.
When you look at that Cork team, will some of those names come back? Like sometimes a manager comes in and he cleans house and it's almost like we're building a new team and he's buying himself a couple of years of breathing room in terms of like that's what he can say to journalists, or even journalists and pundits in the media will talk about, well, we need patience here. Like, has he been too drastic? Are some of these players going to be back that we would have seen maybe in that mauling against Kerry in the championship last summer?
Well, I suppose my understanding is that not every decision was of the management's making.
Okay.
Some guys have opted out. Like, for example, one that he has said publicly, I think he would love to have Mark Collins involved. Mark Collins took a couple of weeks. I don't think he is officially retired, but he's decided to step away from the county game this year. Like, he's been involved for over a decade. I mean, I'm not speaking for him, but it's probably kind of reminds me a bit of the Gary Brennan situation a couple of years ago when he hadn't quite retired, but he kind of just stepped away from Clare. Or even Stephen O'Keefe in hurling. Do you remember he said the way he put it is that he decided to step away, and then over the course of that year, he just decided he didn't want to go back. Like, at a certain stage, despite a guy from the outside to us being really prominent and almost a guaranteed starter, just had enough of it, like with the demands on it and all that. And I think one of the things that happened in Cork, happened in a lot of counties, is the club campaign ran so late last year. And if you weren't successful, you could have been playing right up until late November. The county manager wanted you in straight away, which is perfectly understandable because the league was starting so early. But it's just too short a turnaround, I think, for some guys to maybe kind of commit to it. Separate to that, I think they'll be hoping maybe the injury situation will improve. Probably a bit of a worry for them. Sean Poacher gone off. Like I mentioned Maguire earlier, Poacher's probably the other one that's as important to them. But him got off in the halftime in the Fitzgibbon Cup Final. There is a concern, I think, that he has had another injury setback, which is, a real problem for them, considering he's probably one of the top, really top quality players that they have at their disposal. Other guys then they would have been looking at, like Liam O'Donovan, Cathal O'Mahony, kind of promising youngsters over the last couple of years. They're out injured at the moment. They're hoping they'll kind of get them back. They've obviously had the age-old issue where, a guy who was a promising underage footballer, Mark Keane, has kind of gone down the hurling route at the moment for this year. So I think it's just going to have to be the patience angle. That is the decision at the moment. Like, I think with anything, you need to try and bed in and try and commit guys for about 3 or 4 periods and hope your fortunes improve. And the shining example of that, I think, is their months of rivals, Clare. Look what they did. They've just had a solid crew of players that have just stuck with it. And I saw a good stat. I think yesterday was the first time they've gone 3 games unbeaten in Division 2. Now, they've obviously been really competitive in the division over the last couple of years, but even the way they dug that result out yesterday, was very, very impressive. I thought, to swing 3 points, long range points over, and I think they just have more kind of strength and depth at the moment, and it's shown in the results. But it's going to be very interesting, I think, in Division 2, what's going to happen over the next couple of weeks, because I can't think of a time, as I said, when it feels so stark, one look at the table, how this is really two separate leagues are being played out here,
Yeah, absolutely. Roscommon drew 9 points apiece with Clare, who you mentioned there. Like, what Colm Collins is doing continues to impress. Meath also drew it down 2-6 to 2-6. Derry Cork was the only game that was won pretty much at a canter. In Division 1, Kerry's win over Donegal was the only handy win. Armagh, I have to say, impressive again. They weren't always playing brilliantly throughout that performance. And I do think, to me, it looked like the penalty was over the line. I do think the other decision that Monaghan will definitely be asking questions about is the red card. The footage we saw on the Sunday game footage, it looked like he did very, very little there. But when you look at Armagh, are you thinking this, like, let's not overdo it here, but like, we know it's wide open this year. Could you make a case for Armagh winning the All-Ireland? I know they haven't even won Ulster yet, but could you make that case?
I'm not sure about winning the All-Ireland. I think definitely maybe a sustained run in the championship, semi-final for that sort of thing, but they haven't, they've had a poor record sometimes in championship. They seem like a county that needs a big championship win. They came close a couple of times. You think of the Monaghan one last year. You think of the Mayo qualifier a couple of years ago. I remember Stephen Campbell was brilliant in that. I think that was only 1 or 2 points. But Saturday night is probably more impressive in a different way in terms of the way they dug out a draw, when Monaghan were kind of in the ascendancy. Okay, probably got a stroke of luck when we're looking at the video footage of the McManus thing, didn't look huge into it. Flip side of that, then obviously the penalty. I suppose the footage last night on TV, that looked inconclusive. The footage that was circulating online from the side angle, I thought that was the one. I presume that's the one you're referring to. That's what looked like it was probably over the line, but they're probably asked different questions to themselves. I mean, you're playing Dublin in Cup Park, beautiful surface, great conditions and all that, kind of wide open pitch. They would probably play this kind of wide expansive football. Tyrone was a bit more of an open game than probably we've been used to, maybe in kind of an Ulster clash. There seemed a bit more the kind of traditional traits, in terms of space being at a premium and kind of teams being closed down on Saturday night. So a bit more of that kind of war attrition feel to it. So I think to dig out of results was very, very good. And just like to avoid the defeat, I mean, they're looking at a situation now. If you'd said this to Kieran McGeeney at almost a halfway point to be unbeaten, I think that's a really, really positive sign for them at the moment. And they're now at the stage where they have to be thinking, like Jack O'Connor said yesterday after the game, I'm not sure whether he means this or not, he said our priority is not to win the league. I think even though their priority, they may end up doing it anyway, But like Armagh, you would think are definitely the type of side that, okay, it didn't get them over the line, but you think when Mayo won the league in 2019, I think for a lot of their players, they will look back on it as a big moment in their career. It was a national title in Croke Park, especially the kind of guys who retired. I mean, I remember Randy Moran saying after that game, he said it was great to finally have a moment of joy with his children on the pitch. There was like this catalogue of him, I think, with his daughter, moments of heartbreak, So like for that group of Armagh players, think of the older guys like Campbell, Grugan, and that kind of experienced guys, like, I think they should have a great go of trying to maybe win this league now. And they're certainly in a very, very good position 3 games in to be in that position. And like there's a little bit of a gap appearing there as well. Like obviously you probably weren't expecting Dublin to be on 0 points after 3 games, but like Kildare on 1, that there are a couple of sides struggling. So I think the 3 teams that are on 5 points, Kerry, Armagh and Mayo, I think must be feeling really, really satisfied at this stage, almost approaching the halfway point now,
Yeah, I agree with you in terms of like trying to get that national title when you can. Even if you look at the hurling side of things, Limerick having lost their first 2 games, it kind of opens the door for everyone. Maybe Limerick will come back and blitz the title like they've done before, but it's so difficult to win titles right now if you're not Limerick that anyone that's available, you might as well try and put your hands out for it. And there was a couple of games in both Division 3 and Division 4 that were called off, but the ones that were played, Louth beat Limerick by 2 points, 114-12. Antrim saw off Wicklow by 6 points. London beat Leitrim, like we've mentioned already, and Carlow beat Watford by 4 points. Most games are within a score or 2. There was only the odd one that kind of went outside that. But I noticed in Division 3 and Division 4, there was a couple of games that had to have their venues changed. So the Louth Limerick game, that was supposed to be in the Gaelic grounds, but instead was played in the artificial turf at the UL North campus. And then the London Leitrim game, that was played at the Connacht Centre of Excellence. I just wonder, will we see more of this artificial turf, or, in a situation like the Dome indoor? I mean, but then the problem is you need a place that can facilitate a decent sized crowd if a county board is to make money out of it. We've got an interesting comment in here from Niall Heffernan. He says, only able to dip in on lunch. Would you be able to talk about the abuse of Hegarty online? Grow Hegarty, obviously. I know you said it was a red against Galway and moved on, but between that and Keenan Lynch's red, there's a serious want in a lot of people. Now, it'd be interesting to hear Gerode's take on this, but I suppose, and we talked about it with Ursula Jacob about this the other day, I mean, she'd get plenty of attention because she's on the Sunday game. But do you think, what would you do if you were a player yourself in this situation? There is going to be a bit of, as a journalist, you obviously get a bit of abuse too, because you do put opinions out there. Like if you're a player and you're getting a high volume of abuse, I can't imagine it's a particularly high volume that Gerode is getting, and I hope it's not too bad either. And I hope it's just goes in one ear and out the other. But what would you do if you were a player in this situation? The likes of Stephen O'Keefe told me recently he just got rid of his social media a few months ago.
I think that's probably the way to go.
But shouldn't the player be allowed to have social media too? Or
oh yeah, you can have it if you want, but I suppose it's like you hear a lot of people say this. You're soccer players in England, searching for your name. There's a lot of toxic kind of commentary out there. I just don't really see it's going to be a positive influence. I mean, even for example, if there's an unbelievable amount of praise on social media for you after playing one game, and is that a good sign that, in terms of, I suppose, your attitude and your kind of mental approach going forward, so I just think from a player's point of view, you're probably just kind of parking it. I think the issue with Hegarty has become, it's a bit similar to to Kilkenny stuff when they were at their height. Did Tommy Walsh suffer from a little bit of this, that given the way hurling is, given the nature of it, the kind of aggression is such a premium quality that's needed. When you play on the edge, to use that phrase, that you become the kind of figurehead at the moment for that, what I mean? Hegarty, his point taking, superb, especially around the 2020. 2021. He was early the year. No, sorry, 2020. As I was right in saying, 7 points that final against Waterford. He definitely had taken his game to a new level in terms of the hurling stance. But look, aggression and ball winning are kind of fundamental parts of his game, and their kind of skills he brings to it. I don't think there's any complaints about the Galway one. I mean, we can debate the previous ones that people say he should have been reprimanded for, I suppose the Joe Canning one in 2020, but I don't think there's a debate over that one. And I think there's also an element of some people's eyes, they felt Limerick got away with a couple of calls last year. Definitely, I think the one we would talk about was a couple of the incidents in the Tipperary in the Munster final. And it just happened. It just happens. It happened with Dublin footballers when a team is successful. People do like to see them kind of brought down a peg or two. And if a couple of players are involved in kind of these kind of flashpoints, they are just probably in the spotlight a lot more, and they are kind of examined.
Yeah, okay. So we can have a little quick stop here. There's a series of skills videos up on the OurGame channel. Here's a Gaelic football one with former Longford footballer Pádraig Gill.
Next skill is another type of dummy. It's the hop dummy. Colin Cooper absolutely mastered this one. So similar to the solo dummy, only it's a hop instead of a toe tap. And again, similar to the solo dummy, you have to be aware of your opponent's position and that he's not too close, not too far. Your own body language is very important to not make it obvious that it's a dummy that you're going to sell. And on top of that, for this you have to be aware that it has to be your first play or you're after soloing the ball, because you don't want to hop it twice and commit a foul that way. So kind of line up as if you're going to shoot, and take the bounce, take your man out.
Okay, so there's a whole set of Gaelic football skills and actually hurling ones as well if you want to check out on the playlist there. Just a reminder, we're brought to you by OurGame. If you want to get the likes of this Mayo little zippy, which is very tasty indeed, or any of the jerseys that you'll find on the profile, go to Patreon or go to OurGame. Use the promo code OurGame, you get 15% off. Also, if you want to see Thursday's shows, it's Patreon only, patreon.com/OurGame. It's a $5 a month, works out at basically 50 cents per podcast. And that doesn't include the fact of all the interviews as well. So it's great value there. I want to ask you about the Fitzgibbon Cup Final, Fintan, because obviously it ended in very dramatic circumstances. UL, they won their first title since 2018, beating NUIG 121-215. Mikey Kiley, the Waterford man, He's the hero again with another late goal here. But Cian Lynch was very harshly red carded by Tipperary. We just talked about Grode Hegarty getting a red card and that was deserved against Galway. But this was certainly not deserved. There was a tangle for the ball between himself and Brian O'Mara of Tipperary. Brian O'Mara won the ball, won the free. And then it just seemed like Lynch's hurley, like maybe he pushed his hurley a little bit, but like there was nothing in it. Got tangled in O'Mara's legs. There was a bit of a kerfuffle on the sideline. Ends up being a red card issued by Fergal Horgan. Sean Clear, the linesman, he was there as well. And then after that, it was just a collapse from NUIG. Let's call a spade a spade. And I suppose the fact that they didn't have their main man to hit a puck out on. And Lynch wasn't having his greatest ever game. That has to be said. But if you look at, like, for example, their game against UCD, their games against GMIT, when it's required, he steps up. And having been 3 or 4 points ahead at that stage, I expect they would have seen it out. So what was your thoughts when you saw it?
Well, initially, being honest, when I first saw it live, I thought it wasn't red. I was like, oh, he's lashed out there, just when I glanced at it, But then when I saw the replay, I was watching with my brother, and he was straight away, he goes, I'm not sure it was a tangle. And then I straight away withdrew my remark when I kind of saw the replay, It definitely wasn't. And I suppose it goes back to, we go back to the normal guy incident, I thought, with Lockmore against Ballygunner with the kind of linesman intervention. There just has to be absolute certainty. Look, if that's what the linesman saw, and if he thought it was a kind of lash out, he doesn't have the benefit of the video referee, but you kind of just have to be absolutely sure, and you have to get that call straight on, right? Because one of the most blatant examples, I think, recently of having a huge impact on a game, I mean, like that Noel McGrath one, I think, is a little bit different, but in terms of red that happens towards the end of the game, it was at 15 to 17 points when he got sent off. They conceded 1-4 without reply. I do think UL have showed in this competition they have a stronger squad. They had more options coming off the bench. I do agree with you. I think by his extraordinarily high standards, Lynch was pretty quiet, and like there definitely was something to when you come, comparison as well with David Clifford in the Sigerson final. Like the absolute stars at the end of the competition just weren't quite on it, in terms of kind of passing and that. It just wasn't quite working out to the same extent. It was, I thought, David Nyland show really as the game was going on, and John Fleming for NUIG, but they definitely were in the driving seat. You definitely thought that. They probably would have been able to relieve the pressure of somebody, by as you say, put a puck out down on top of them or whatever. But yeah, so look, I don't think there's any question. I think they're actually appealing it anyway. NUIG have kind of said straight afterwards and all that they are looking to kind of get it rescinded, But it's pretty tough for them because it is one of those competitions that there isn't a next year. There isn't an option, for a good few of the lads. Like, for example, Lees Lynch has, I suppose, he has 2 Fitzgibbon Cup medals already with Mary Iba. He did say last week that he did really enjoy his time in NUIG, but he's done with the competition now. He's the end of his 2-year course. I think for the likes of Nyland and a couple of the older guys, Brian Concannon is injured. I think that's their last go with NUIG. So it's obviously absolute elation for UL. And over the course of the competition, especially with the semi-final, like they showed just persevering and sticking with it, and probably get onto the Mikey Kiley thing in a minute, but it's definitely got to hurt NUIG. It's a serious regret when you look back to the way the complexion of the game changed so dramatically after that dismissal. Mikey
Kiley, it's become his competition, hasn't it? I mean, the way he scored that in extra time, injury time of extra time winning goal in the semi-final against IT Carlow, that was unbelievable. The way he turned his man, went at his man and buried this goal as well. It just showed, I thought actually at times last year, that he looked like he was really ready to become a star forward in that Waterford team. I remember one of the games he came on, and I can't remember which one it was. Maybe it was the Tipperary game, or maybe it was the Limerick game. But once or twice he got the ball and he kind of laid it off. And then Liam Cahill turned to him and he said, "Go at your man." I mean, I'm kind of lip reading, but basically the message seemed to be "go at your man." That he trusts Mikey Kiley to be able to do that, and that's what we saw with that winning goal the other day against NUIG. But I suppose he just kind of comes into the bracket of players that could be breakout players this summer. Now, breakout players don't necessarily need to be under 20 or under 21, but just players that haven't really entirely established themselves in their county team just yet, and maybe this will be their year. A couple of ones that stood out to me, if I can just be a Tipperary man, is I'd look at Brian O'Mara and the fact, the way he's filled out physically. He started the league last year, and a broken arm probably hampered his chances of the summer. And then Kieran Connolly, who was so exciting for Lockmore Castellani. Both of these lads were really, really good. Now they're both heading away for the summer.
I'm I imagine the amount of Tip fans watching that game on Saturday, with every good part that either of them did, it must have been like the regret must have kind of heaped on more and more, you know? It was like as if just a reminder of what both of them could offer. And they've obviously shown it before at various levels, but it was just interesting on the same pitch in the same game. You have these two standout players, and it's like neither can be involved this summer, you know?
Yeah, and do you know what the interesting thing is too? The All-Ireland final is middle of July this year. So if you know, and lads are heading away for the summer, you don't begrudge it. Like, anyone can do whatever they want with their life. They don't owe us to line out for their county.
And especially with the last couple of years, the way they haven't had this opportunity, you know, I think it's hard to completely...
You definitely couldn't begrudge. But I wonder, was like there a conversation whereby, you know, Colin Bonner would obviously love to get a few games into these players. Like, they do look like physically they're hitting that sort of shape whereby they could become very good inter-county players and have them involved this year. Like, Munster is over by the middle of May, incredibly. And then the middle of July, the entire thing is over. If Tipperary, and the unlikely, as it looks right now, unlikely to get to an All-Ireland final. So if they just held off for a couple of weeks, they could have their cake and eat it. But I suppose that's not the way it's going to pan out this year. But let's talk about some of these other breakout players. I think there are two that could have become breakout players this summer. But who else is standing out to you before we kind of reveal our list of 3 players each that we think could be that this year?
Well, like, Kylie's a good example, in fairness, because, I mean, look, he was still only under 20 last year, and there was flashes. I think you're right. I think it was the All-Ireland quarter-final against Tip and Páirc Uí Chaoimh when he kind of stood out. But he also just offer something different to other kind of Waterford forwards, that he's so kind of big and rangy. He reminds me a small bit of Dan Shanahan when he kind of used to go in around the goal. And, you know, once he kind of puts the hand up, there is that kind of sense that a goal is on straight away, you know. And then obviously, as a lot of people said, they were reminded last week with his goal against IT Carlow that it was the skill when he kind of put that dip on the ball. You know, it was Paul Flynn-esque, I suppose, from the 2004 Munster final was the natural kind of one people were looking at, you know. But in that game, a couple of Kilkenny guys I thought kind of stood out who, you know, I think we were both at the Kilkenny Tip game, and as difficult a match as it was at times to watch, there was flashes from Niall Brazel and Cian Kenny. Looked like two guys that could kind of shape up and come into the reckoning. Shane Meehan of Clare looks very, very exciting. He's had a couple of injury worries. He's obviously from a very small club in Ennis, the kind of smaller one that people wouldn't be aware of the banner, but looks like he definitely has something to offer. You look at, you know, I think did he get a goal? Or he got one goal against Wexford, wasn't it? And then Mark Fanning obviously produced an unbelievable save for the other one and kind of stopping him. I think there's a load of Galway guys from the NUIG setup who I think Shefflin could be looking at, or GMIT last week, that he, you know, when he's trying to kind of do a bit of an overhaul over the next couple of years to try and come into the reckoning. So two others, Colin Coughlin as a wing back option for Limerick, maybe might come into it, and obviously Dublin have had a couple of very good under 20 sides over the last couple of years. One of them getting to a delayed All-Ireland final. So, you know, I think Andrew Dunphy is probably one of the ones that's kind of come into the reckoning from St. Bridget's, has been cornerback there. And just one Tipperary guy who I think is going to be around for the summer, and probably I think this could be his time, will be Craig Morgan, you know, the All-Ireland winning captain of 2019. His progress has probably been stalled a little bit, I think, over the last couple of years in the kind of COVID interrupted seasons. But I just wonder, is there a sign in the first couple of games with Colin Bonner is basically said, there's the number 4 jersey. It's, you know, it's up to you to kind of give it away now after that. Yeah,
it's interesting. Like, Brian McGrath is somebody that could potentially be on this list too. But just, even though Colin Bonner said he's going to change the team up from here on, it's just that we haven't seen him yet. And he definitely had a late start because a lot more is long season. But I wonder, could he become a breakout one this year? Cork Daly, I mean, he's very highly rated. Obviously, Irla Daly's highly rated in Cork. Yeah, Kieran Joyce, Tommy O'Connell. I mean, when I saw Tommy O'Connell, even when he moved into the forwards at Middleton against, was it Kilmallock that day, you could just see he's a pure hurler. Cathal O'Neill's an obvious enough one. Conor Bowe with Tipperary, having spent a year with the Tipperary senior footballers, now he's in with the hurlers. Galway, you mentioned who Henry Shefflin might be looking at. There was comments on different on our different platforms. TJ Brennan, who obviously started for UL against NUIG.
His battle with Chris Nolan last Thursday night was unbelievable. I thought, in a classic case afterwards where you said they both play well. You're not going to wear a full back and a full forward. But yeah, he looks brilliant prospect. Yeah. I think he's young enough as well, and he's another guy. You know, Clanbridge got to a county final. He's built on that. He's had a good Fitzgibbon campaign. All the signs are there that he's a lot of momentum coming into the senior setup now. Yeah, so he could have a big season. Donal O'Shea, I think he probably needs another year or two before, you know, he can
really nail down that place. But talent-wise, you can see he's got something coming. Keenan Fahey is someone. John Fleming produced some really good moments for NUIG. Conor Caulfield is actually someone I saw play against Dublin a few weeks ago. I think he looks like he's got a bit of talent. But Patrick Crotty, I'm not sure if you mentioned him when you were talking about Clare. Even his performance when he came on against Wexford, I thought was
he definitely got the eye, yeah.
Yeah, he certainly did. John Fleming, as A Sully 180 is saying here. So I suppose we'll bring up our lists here. We decided to do a list. We like to rank these things so that people can be taken to task a little bit later down the line. The two dailies were to mention, Conor Mack 1, 2, 3. Yeah, we certainly did mention those. So here's our top threes. I'm thinking Mikey Kiley could end up being the number one breakout hurling star of 2022. Cathal O'Neill, now because of the injuries to a couple of the Limerick forwards, which include Barry Murphy and Peter Casey, that might open the door for Cathal O'Neill more so than Colin Coughlin in the back, because they're absolutely stacked. So Colin Coughlin might have to be a little bit more patient just yet. And then Mark Keogh. Now, I know people might raise their eyebrows and say, well, what are you talking about? We've seen an awful lot of Mark Keogh already. And he did start the championship game in late 2020 down in the driving rain in Páirc Uí Chaoimh against Limerick when Tipperary got absolutely battered. But I think this could be his year where he really takes over. He's an All-Ireland winner already, but I just feel that he's not entirely established in the team, and this could be his year. So now we'll throw it over to yours, and you let us know why you've picked this 1, 2, 3.
Okay, so it's kind of no particular order, but say the first one I went for.
Oh, it has to be in an order. It has to be in an order.
Okay, well, you see, you didn't say that to me earlier. You
just did. Check your text.
You just said, give me 3 names, and you weren't even saying alphabetical order or whatever. Okay, look, I don't mind if this is the 1, 2, 3. Like, Joyce is, I haven't come across a guy in Cork that has been as hyped, and I can't think of a guy who is mainly traditionally a defender that has been as hyped coming out of underage ranks, you know? I mean, like, as a brief kind of a career, kind of a CV, at 16, he was centre-back on a Harty Cup winning team for Middleton CBS. He then stepped straight out of minor to be centre-back for the Cork under-20s. They won the All-Ireland last year. He then, obviously, a few weeks later, won another under-20 All-Ireland. He was also centre-back for his club, Castlemartyr, as they won 2 counties last year because one had been delayed from the previous year. So started number 6 in all these positions. So he's still under-20 this year. So he is eligible to go for the 3 in a row. The under-20 championship starts in April. But all the signs are that he's obviously going to be moving into the directing for the seniors. Started really well with that performance against Clare. Interestingly, that he's at midfield. One of the debates, I suppose, in Cork is whether should they be looking to push Mark Coleman into there and put in Joyce, who's kind of more traditional 6 in at centre back. It would be a big ask, in fairness, to be putting under 20 maybe in straight in at centre back, but probably showed a side to that he hadn't. Like, his defensive abilities have been really, really good. Like, for example, in last year's Munster under 20 final, the regular Cork full-back got injured. He had to go back full-back for the last 10-15 minutes and was really, really good there. But in the Clare game recently, I thought it was interesting in terms of his, I suppose, his hurling skill in terms of his ability going forward. And he got 3 points in play, so he looks like he's big potential, and he is a guy that a lot of people are kind of banking on. I think in terms of the Cork setup, in terms of if they need kind of defensive reinforcements to kind of back it up there. Cathal O'Neill, I'm kind of backing you up on that one. You know, I think, like, physically he just looks like he can step into it straight away. I remember Sean Fahey being asked last year about a couple of the guys who come into the setup, and he said the one thing is he couldn't believe, he talked about Cathal O'Neill and Colin Coughlin in terms of how they look physically ready for it straight away. I think last year there was kind of bits and pieces. He was given game time by John Kiley. The signs was that the 4 points a couple of weeks ago against Galway, you know, that he's kind of ready to step up. It will be interesting to see where they play him, because the vacancy, I guess, in attack is that kind of one out forward inside coming in as a link man. That's probably not his game. So if you are to accommodate him, does he have to go centre forward with Tom Morrissey and Gerald Hegarty either side? And are you looking to put Cian Lynch back to midfield then? Not so sure. Do you push him in closer to goal? You know, it's the vacancy has probably arisen in maybe in an attacking position that isn't quite suited to him, but I think he'll probably be more influential off the bench. And I think all the signs are there with everything he's done at our school reach level. I think he's in UL now, you know, that he is one guy that's going to kind of step up. And the third one is probably the one like you I'm going to get pilloried for in terms of, I suppose it's not young hurler of the year.
He's nearly 24.
Well, that is he is this year, yeah. Evan Island. But I just think that we have to be conscious of, I think, the last couple of years kind of stalling the progress of a couple of guys. I think there's no doubt about it. Some of the county managers did just stick with the tried and trusted because they had a shorter lead in time in terms of championship team selections. you don't know how much guys weren't, I suppose, exposed to the proper training levels and all that. But there's definitely been brilliant signs with Ireland. He's just an outstanding free taker. Like, he's unbelievable from every single angle possible and distance. There's obviously a free taking vacancy now in Galway at the moment with Joe Cannon gone now, and Jason Finn are injured. Now, in fairness, Conor Cooney hasn't exactly looked poor with his performance for St. Thomas and obviously against Limerick last week. So there probably has to be a bit more to it than that. But I think, he shot off a lot of great points, I thought, for NUAG. I mean, like, I worked out, he had 79 points in 6 games in the Fitzgibbon Cup this year. Bearing in mind, we can get into debates about the weight of a Slater and one of those games at extra time, but a lot of the fixtures were 60 minutes. It's a sign that basically anywhere a free is conceded within a half back line up, he is a chance that he's going to nail it and put it over. And again, I just wonder, he's had a year where, okay, neither side actually won, but he got to a county final with Clarenbridge, he got to a Fitzgibbon final with NUAG. Is there a couple of vacancies in that Galway attack, and could this be the year that he's going to kind of, no more than his club colleague TJ Brennan, who's obviously a bit younger and probably has a bit more time on the side, going to keep that momentum? But he's still only under 24. Like, I suppose people probably think he's kind of been around a while in Ireland, but I think there's definitely huge scope there for him to make an impact.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Even the Shelminator here is bringing in Jake Morris, who's probably had too much game time as a starter for Tipperary to really be included. But just the sneering in here.
He does look very good, his form at the moment, though, in fairness. Like, the couple of moments of class and the way he kind of dashed onto balls, I thought against Kilkenny, he scored one and had one set up, Maybe it is a kind of a, I don't know, bit of a years of experience under his belt that Intercounty setup, feels more comfortable at that level now.
Yeah, and the reason I bring up the comment is, hopefully Mark Rogers' injury isn't too bad, but Michael Verney for Wicklow, LOL for the Shelminator. I like that element of sneering. Conor Mack 123, he's asking about Shane O'Regan's transfer within Cork. I'm not sure if you know too much about that or if it's a bit of a tasty subject.
Yeah, look, to be honest, not much more than kind of what's been reported. It does seem to be in a bit of a contentious one. His club objected from the very start, and it came up at county board level. The latest is, I think, that it was one of 3 or 4 within the county that was refused last week. Obviously, it's a pretty high-profile one when a young guy is transferring within a county. I think it's different when guys transfer to clubs in different counties. But I don't know, is he involved in the Cork senior stuff at the moment? But it definitely sounds a bit of a contentious one at the moment.
So we'll just move on to Camogie finally before we finish up here. And I was reading a story in the Clare Echo. So Cork beat Clare 2-6 to 4 points in Camogie, and both Conor Dolan, who's over the Clare team, and Davy Fitz, who's a coach now with the Cork Camogie team, were both sent off. And just to read some of the article, one of the big talking points came 5 minutes from the end when Clare joint manager Conor Dolan and Cork coach Davy Fitz clashed on the sideline. Referee John Darmody flashed red cards to both, sending them to the stand for the remaining time. Interestingly, Fitzgerald's son Colm is part of the Clare backroom team, while Colm's friend James Hickey, a Cratloe clubman, fills a similar role with Cork. And Davy told the Clare Echo he was delighted with the result, but a bit disappointed with what happened on the sideline. I don't think there was any need for it, but that's the way he goes. And Dolan said that finishes there. That's his response. So that was one of the stories that stood out from the Camogie from the weekend. Obviously, there was the situation with the All-Ireland semi-finals, and I suppose Aulart de Bella, they're well, I suppose the big thing here is the situation with Gorey being picked as the All-Ireland Club semi-final venue for the clash of Sarsfields and Schlockneal. That definitely raised a lot of eyebrows. But I suppose in many ways they were scratching around when the game was originally changed from Saturday to Sunday, and it needed to refix this thing. It was probably a needs-must situation where just they had to find any venue, and it ends up being a very odd one because it couldn't be further away from both of them.
Yeah, look, I think everyone's seen the kind of maps being drawn, Google Maps, and it's pointed out how much of a distance the teams have to travel, But in fairness, I suppose I was wondering, was there anything to be said for like just not playing the game? Like, they've just held it back a week. Maybe there's an urgency in fixtures that they have to, I don't know when the All-Ireland final is, maybe in a couple of weeks in Croke Park, that they had to get it played somewhere, because it just seemed mad kind of bringing them both all the way down there, particularly Schlockneal, almost going the length of the country to kind of play the game, But it was pointed out, I saw Will O'Callaghan and Killian Whelan kind of both going through the various fixtures. I mean, some of the responses, like the response from everyone now when there's a GA thing on is like, why don't they play it in the Dome? Like I saw this said recently about some, was it the Sigerson final? They should have played it in the Dome. And I was like, well, bring in Limerick and Galway all the way up there. And as it was, the GA coaching games conference was on there, for example, at the weekend. and there was already a game on there, London Leitrim, in actually one of the grass pitches. And then you looked around other games, like for example, Westmeath Longford's match was called off in Mullingar. So like that northern half of the country was kind of worst hit with the weather in terms of fixtures not being available. But I do have sympathy for fixture makers in this situation. Like, they really are scrambling around last minute trying to find some of these venues. I would have thought they should have just left the game, but obviously that wasn't an option in terms of they felt that they really had to get it played and that they had no choice. But pretty sore one for Schlockneil, considering they only lost by a point, having kind of embarked on that long trip down.
Yeah, and just to kind of touch on the scorelines, Owlert beat Scariff Ogonlow 3-11 to 2 points. I don't think Scariff scored in the first half, and Sarsfields, they beat Schlockneil 2-4 to 9 points after extra time. So obviously very, very tight game.
Just to say one thing actually about that Cork Clare Camogie game you were talking about, quite interesting. Like, maybe it doesn't happen as often in Camogie, but Sorcha McCartan from Down, who would have been kind of one of Down's better Camogie players, she's now like living and working in Cork. She's actually transferred to Cork. She started full forward. So I can't think of too many examples among the kind of top 4 or 5 traditional kind of Camogie counties the last couple of years where someone has, for different reasons, county-wise, kind of switched. Obviously, you know, there's been different instances in GA where it's happened, like, but it'll be interesting to kind of see where she goes this season. But yeah, she played full forward yesterday, her first game.
Wouldn't be like Cork to get some important transfers. Even James Lockery a few years ago, a couple of Kildare men before that. You know,
I don't understand the insinuation here. Look, people have to move for work reasons, Shane, all around the country, you know.
Okay, so that's it for today's show. A reminder, we're brought to you by OurGameRetro.com. If you want to get a top like this, any of the ones on screen, there's absolutely loads of them from all the different counties. Go to OurGameRetro.com and get the promo code OurGame. If you want the show on Thursday, it's going to be Patreon only from now on. Patreon.com/OurGame. $5 a month works out about 50 cents to go every time. I think we've all said, Finton. Thank you very much, and sure, we'll see you again soon.
No worries, Shane.